So we're going to jump back into Rodric Williams' testimony to the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, and he seems to pick issue with the word strategy being used. Now, it's a word Rodric Williams has used himself in his own witness statement, but nevertheless, he asked Jason Beer to define what the word strategy means to him, which triggers a typically Jason Beer response as we've come to know. He also describes requests by the journalist Nick Wallis in 2014 having questions about the Horizon system and its effect on subpostmasters to be, quote, ridiculous. Why does Rodric Williams think Nick Wallis's questions are ridiculous? If you do have a couple of quid spare to support our work, then please see the Patreon and Locals links in the description and our profile. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. Let's jump into the inquiry.
If you didn't have an understanding of what Post Office's general attitude and strategy towards the media was so far as concerned Horizon, can we look at some examples of how you approach the media in practice? And I stress these are only examples, time doesn't permit me to go through all material. Can we start, please?
So just before we do, I'm sorry if I can, I'm struggling with these questions a little bit. Can I understand what you mean by strategy? Because I'm worried we have a disconnect, and I do want to answer the questions properly.
I haven't got my dictionary with me at the moment, Mr. Williams, but I would understand, and I intend by my questions, the word strategy to mean as follows: a pre-designed plan that has aims and objectives. I'm making this up on the hoof. That has aims and objectives.
Well, there's nothing like getting schooled by Jason Beer at an public inquiry, is there? I mean, it certainly does seem to be, if we're going to play with words a bit, I mean, you would hope that a head of legal understands strategy, because presumably they employ strategies when they bring cases, you would hope.
That's a strategy in my mind. Does that help you?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. And I'm sorry.
Well, it's just you use the word here.
Yeah,
see,
I appreciate it. I'm sorry if that's my poor use. I just want to understand, because I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your question. Please.
See, should paragraph 175 read, "I did not have an understanding of the Post Office's strategy towards the media"?
Following this discussion, I think it may have read better. My understanding of Post Office's general approach at that time to the media would have been, and I apologise if I'm sort of getting into sophistry or anything like that, but the pre-designed plan, I would have accepted if we'd had something like that, to have had that articulated or presented to me or made clear to me. And I don't recall having that, and that's why I've been struggling. I'm sorry.
Well, surely an approach has aims and objectives as well. Are we just using synonyms of words now and kind of getting lost in some potentially, may I say, irrelevant detail? You know, what was the plan that the Post Office had? There's another word for us.
Let's look at some examples then, rather than engage in sophistry. Poll 00101923.
While that's coming up, Mr. Williams, can I just be clear? Was this point man, to use the expression role, something that you assumed more or less as soon as you joined the Post Office, or was it later in time than that?
Thank you, Simon. It was pretty much at the beginning. I helped with something unrelated, probably certainly within the first 6 months of my time.
Fine.
And still working there, having no understanding of the strategy even now, because there must be a strategy at the moment with the Post Office with how they deal with Horizon-related issues, because they're at the forefront of everyone's attention, including the media.
And so you if I can put it in this way, that part of your work was something that began shortly after you started and continued right through the period that Mr. Beer has identified.
That's correct, sir.
Fine, thanks.
Can we start, please, by looking at page 3 of this document?
I'm sorry, I recognise this as quite a long email train. Could I have a bundle reference, please?
E51.
E51. Thank you.
I wonder why he's not looking at it on the screen like all the other witnesses have.
Yeah, thank you.
If we look at the foot of page 3, we can see an email from Nick Wallis, the journalist, dated the 16th of December 2014,
yes,
to Mark Davis. He was essentially in charge of Post Office's media and communications, is that right?
Yes.
And Mr. Wallis says, "Hi, Mark, I wonder if your colleagues could help me with a few queries." And then he starts setting them out. Yes? And this was, I think you'll recall, in the run up to the One Show broadcast.
Yes.
Thank you. And then if we go up the page, you'll see Mr. Davis passes it to a wider group of people, including you. Hi, another email from the BBC, now raising a series of new questions. Yes? And then if we go to the foot of page 2.
Journalists asking questions, whatever next?
We can see you replied, 16th of December, 2:16, Rodric Williams wrote, and then if you go to the top of page 3, you say, "Without having read them closely, only that this is getting ridiculous. We're being asked to address an ever-expanding range of serious issues on a piecemeal basis with constantly shifting goals in an attempt to get Nick Wallis a story which is, quote, news. On the upside, they suggest we're starting to land our points. This line of inquiry is focused on the user-friendliness of Horizon, not on the accuracy of what it records or what we do with that information. I'll revert on the substance shortly."
Well, how can you answer questions when you've not read them closely? But anyway, it certainly seems there's a bit of hostility towards Nick Wallis in his questions here. But given that at this point in 2014, Horizons had issues first reported, 15 years ago, even if we just go from the rollout of the main Horizon software, I mean, it's not surprising that there's questions across a wide range of issues related to Horizon, given how many prosecutions and cases and people have been suspended and dismissed that there's been up until this point. That's what happens when you have a scandal that is brewing over the course of decades.